What is good, my people? We are live. I know I'm coming on a little bit late, but I come on to holler at y'all before I start working on the next video. I wanted to come talk to y'all, whatever. And make sure y'all subscribe to the backup channel, because the new video will be on there. It's the Forecast Radio 24. It's in the description. So make sure y'all go on there, and subscribe so you know when the next video is coming out. Now, I don't plan on being on here too long. I know I always say that, but I don't plan on being on here too long. But I definitely want y'all to call in or whatever. I want to hear what y'all got to say. The number right there on the screen is 804-601-4015. And I definitely want to hear what y'all got to say. Now, you know, we already know about our enemy and their plan to target us, right? And we talk all the time about how can we get to this point where we're on code and we're doing what we have to do, right? The first thing that you have to do to build a nation is first have a strong family household, right? You have to have a good environment to raise healthy children in. Now, we are in a culture designed to create self-hate within us to keep us on this perpetual cycle of self-hatred, you know, to enslave ourselves so they don't even have to really do the work. And one issue that we definitely have to address is the mental health issues in our community, because we have a whole lot of mental health issues in our community. And the thing about, the society, none of it is by accident. All of it is by design. There's a reason why they have to keep us separated and arguing all the time. And one of the major, divisions that we have in our community is, the gender wars that they try to project onto our community. We take on our oppressors' issues and try to make them as their our own or something. But that's why it's important that we start getting control over our children's mind, because one of the main things that integration did was take the little bit of self loves that we were being taught, that we were teaching our children, and they replaced that with even more Eurocentric views of the world. Now we're sitting here looking at ourselves through the lens of white supremacists. But the only way that stuff is going to change is that we change ourselves individually. Not so much change ourselves, but change our mindset. Get back into the mindset that we're supposed to have. Get that fear out of our heart. Get that caution when we look at each other and understand where that comes from. And, understand, like, we've been through, as Black people, especially like here in America or whatever, we've been through so much, and there is a lot of issues and trauma that we have to resolve within our own community. But we are never going to make progress until we start coming to each other from a place of love and not from a place of anger, hate, disappointment. We have to save that energy for our enemies. What's going on, that dude? Because, your enemy understood it's easier to make a slave from a baby than to make someone who has known freedom a slave. So they've always had to control the mind of our children, the mind of the child. So that way they can teach them what they want, and then they can grow up and instill that into the next generation. And then we start getting on a start getting on a self-deprecating cycle where you see all of the mental illness, the trauma, and everything being passed down from generation to generation. And then on top of that, we are fed propaganda nonstop, constantly. And if somebody repeats something over and over, not only do they start to believe it, you start to believe it too. You start to internalize it. So you start to take on some of the characteristics yourself, but you see those very characteristics in other people that look like you, whether it's true or it's not. But okay, hold on. But the whole thing is literally set up to be this way for us to stay divided, because if we aren't able to build strong homes, strong communities, then how are we ever going to protect ourselves? Right? Because if you come into a community that is functioning like it's supposed to, you aren't just going to be able to harm little children. You aren't going to be able to harm the elderly. Right? But oh yeah, my bad. But and they put this whole system in place for the family structure to be broken down, because they understand that's the cornerstone of a powerful nation, is a family. And from day one, the Black family has been under complete attack, because they understand that's where the power lies. If they can get control of your mind and create this perpetual mindset of self-hatred, of slavery, then you would just be on a cycle on your own. And now we look in the world and dealing with each other. There's so much mental illness that's not being addressed within our own communities. But all of this was done on design, by design, on purpose. And now we sit here arguing with each other rather than looking at our enemy and realizing who they are. But you already know that it's by design, because you can go back, right, from the very beginning when they first got here to America, right? They made sure to keep black families, or keep people from even wanting black women, right? Because that's usually what an abuser tries to do. They try to isolate you so that you have no one, so that they can do whatever they want to you, so you can feel low, so that you are hurt, and you will put up with a lot more, right? And they would pass laws literally to make a distinction between white women, Europeans, and black women. And even at the beginning, in the early 1600s, when people got to America, it was an extra law. I mean, it was an extra tax if you wanted to marry a black woman, that you were excluded from if you married a white woman. So so basically everybody who came to the colonies had to pay a tax, and eventually women were excluded from paying a tax. But black women still had to pay, anyone 16 and up, including black women. So if you married a black woman, you had to pay double taxes. And then in 1662, they passed a law that said any child born to a black woman in slavery is basically in perpetual servitude. Their whole generation is supposed to be slaves. But all of that is designed to make you not even want to deal with what's going on, Al. Those were planting the seeds from the very beginning to make black women undesirable. But then again, these are the same women that they had to depend on to raise their own children. Right? They had to get these women to breastfeed their own children, to raise their own children. But then turn around and be so jealous because their husbands preferred black women over them, that they would be the most brutal. They would torture them the most, right? Because we always give white women this pass, even though they may be responsible for most of the deaths when it came to our community, as far as them blaming it on saying a black man raped her. But they had to show you that you were savage, because the goal is to masculize or whatever black women and feminize black men. That's why they took the biggest black man in front of everybody and broke him down, to send a message, to show you. And when somebody can walk into your home, and when somebody can walk into your home and rape your wife or your daughter or your mom right in front of you, or either take them back for their company to do what they want with them, and you just sit there and wait for her to come back, you're going to lose a little bit of respect each time that happens, because you're not supposed to still be breathing while that is happening. You can't let anybody come in and disrespect your family. But the whole thing was to show you that you are beneath, to show you that you are beneath them, right? That's a whole superiority complex thing, right? Somebody who has no boundaries and could do anything to somebody, but we start internalizing that, and we can't ignore all of the trauma that we have had that has been passed down from generation to generation, like it doesn't, or is not going to have an effect on us. And we are trying to integrate into a sick society, and then wondering why we have so many problems, right? We've been taught that the way our hair grows out of our head is something wrong with that. We don't see ourselves as desirable because they have been telling us for centuries that we are undesirable, all while being so infatuated with us that they can't leave us alone. But for some reason, we cannot see what your oppressor already knows. They know the power that you have, but they have to keep you mentally unstable, mentally unhealthy, to be able to come in and violate you and do you any kind of way to keep you as a servant. And now we have problems dealing and building our own communities now, and we blame each other. But we don't realize we still operating under the illusion of inclusion. Because the whole time they tell you black women is this, black woman is that, they depended on them for their lives. And as much as they tell you black men is this, black men is that, they depended on us for our lives. There's a reason why they had to come and kidnap us. And this is a place where you couldn't even get married if you wanted to, right? It was against the law in most places, especially slave states, for two slaves to get married. It didn't really count because at any time, one of you could be sold. And most times, out of spite, they use their children as leverage, telling them they're going to send them off to the most brutal plantation if they don't bow down and do what they're supposed to do. Now, you already know that's a sick mentality of a psychopath. But when somebody threatens to do that with your family could be broken apart, shredded at any time. That has an effect, especially over centuries, over time. But even still, right after quote unquote slavery, chattel slavery ended, right, on paper, or when they argue that it ended, black people still had the strongest family unit as far as getting married, holding each other down. Do you know why? Because there was no illusion of inclusion. They knew that a white dude riding around with a shotgun can bust up in their house anytime they want to. But they started to build a self pride, a self love, to where they started to defend their own neighborhoods. If you violated a black person they shot back. They did what they had to do, right? They built black wealth because it's not that hard. It's not about what somebody else will let you do. It's about the mindset that they have. They knew that all they had was each other. So they built their own communities. But they knew the very thing they had to do, destroy that community, was destroy the homes, right? To economically starve them, right? They create the problems in our communities and then step back and say, look at the problems in your community. But we can't let somebody else come in and do that. So, then of course everybody blames the whole feminist movement and all of that, but that was a systematic targeting, right? They created a environment of poverty, and then they came to black women and said, we'll provide you with homes, we'll give you food, we'll even give you health care, but you have to stay away from this black man. Now, in hindsight, we can judge them all we want, but at the time, you have, imagine you have a newborn baby or you're pregnant, right? There is no jobs in the city for 20,000 black men. There's probably 100. You don't know what's going to happen. Now, in hindsight, we definitely know what they should have did. They should have stuck together and did what they had to do. But this was coming off of their towns being destroyed violently, or using stuff like the Highway Act, where they built highways right through the industrial parts of the black community, because they have to target you financially. Because, the most important part of a family having a child is being able to provide a stable environment for that kid. But a psychopath has to create chaos because that's the only way that they can operate. So they have to create chaos in our communities to keep you in a subservient position. And so, they had to intentionally come out and destroy our families so that we would be weak in protecting ourselves. And one of those ways to create an imbalance is to raise one over the other. Raise one gender over the other. That step back, watch them argue, create the issues, create the divisions, and step back and watch them fight it out. But all of that has been that by design. But we got to come to a point where we got to start having um, tough conversations about how we're going to rebuild our community. We come to a place, we have to realize we're at a place where we can create whatever we want to create. We can build whatever we want to build. But we have to start coming to the table and start seeing where that disunity is that's keeping us from getting back on code. Because looking at our history, even relatively here in America, this division is relatively new. This illusion of inclusion is relatively new. For hundreds of years, it's only been about 50 years of illusion of inclusion. But we don't understand our history. But it's easy to do that when you create chaos in a community, when you create a poverty mindset in a community to get you down on the basic instinct of survival. But we got to come to a place where we can start having healthy relationships with each other, because we're never going to get anywhere unless we start having strong families, because it takes a strong family to build a strong neighborhood, which builds a strong community, which builds a strong nation. So we got to somehow come to a point where we can have discussions on both sides about what we need to have and what we need to do to stay on code. And we have to get that fear out of our heart. Of course, your enemy is never going to let you do anything other than be a slave for them. And we all got issues and all of that. But as a black man, I know that when we build a nation, right, those people who we think that there's no hope for, they're just, a lot of people just need something to follow, something to have their back, something they can lean on, right? They are fear that they'll lose everything because we don't have anything of our own. We allow somebody else to come in and take what we have. Now, are you going to allow that to continue to happen? Or at some point, you're going to have to stand up for yourself and do what you have to do? Now, and I'll say this because, as somebody who doesn't have kids, never been married, and all of that stuff, I think we come to a place where, it's not that you have to follow it, but to me, right, it'll be best if people start waiting until their 30s to start having children, right? First, you got to teach yourself, educate yourself, experience the world, have experiences, right? Love yourself, build self confidence, build knowledge, something that you can instill to your children. Take time to learn yourself, who you are, right? And then when we start dealing with each other, in my opinion, I know people would think it's a long time, but before you start having children, I think you should be with somebody for at least 5 years, or at least living with each other, for at least 3 years, right? Because that first year is going to be all great. The second year, you might see little flaws. But the third year, if you can really go that far living with somebody, then you could probably go 20 years raising a child. Because all of that stuff is very important when it comes to building a community. You have to build warriors, but warriors with the right mindset. Because this society is producing, or is designed to produce, or at least put our warrior class in the prison to make sure that they don't unify, to keep them locked up. But we have to start teaching our children that it's okay to be doctors, lawyers, scientists, but all of that starts with having strong parents, strong family structures. But we are caught up in somebody else's society, seeing things through a different lens. And now, we most of the attention goes into, building self-hate. But of course, a psychopath is going to show you nothing but the worst of yourself. That's why our children have this complex where they see a black doll and they think it's ugly. They see themselves, they think it's ugly. They try to instill this low self worth, self confidence, right? That's why a lot of people have a hard time, because you're coming from a place of low confidence, low self worth. They've made sure that our family structure has been destroyed, and now that creates a lot of mental illness in our communities. And there's nothing like that psychopath mentality that would create a system like that. But you got to understand, a psychopath is going to create a system of destruction. They love to see other people hurting. That's what gets them off. But these are, the important conversations that we need to start having. And like I said, I'm not gonna be on here long tonight. I just wanted to come on before I start the video. But I'm definitely gonna start having more people on to have, these kind of conversations, to talk about, how can we rebuild our family structure? What can we do to get this self-hate, this mindset off of us? Because at the end of the day, we are all we got. And until we start rebuilding our own communities, then we are going to be under attack. You can't live in a society, you can't integrate with a psychopath. You can't reason with them, you can't talk to them, you can't ask them for anything. You have to start with the basics. But I definitely appreciate all of y'all, man. I'm probably gonna come on. I know I came on late or whatever, but I got a little caught up. But I definitely appreciate all of y'all. Make sure y'all subscribe to the backup channel, man. I'm gonna try to be back on Sunday. I'm gonna give y'all a little bit more warning. Got to get better planning these lives or whatever. But remember, all of this is by design. And the brother Bakari has something called uncomfortable conversations, and these are the conversations that we have to work out, because you have to take it one step at a time, right? Powerful nations weren't built in a day, and you got to understand how powerful you are, because they go this far, they would go to this length to make sure that you are disunified. But as always, man, we have got to start standing for something, or we're gonna keep falling for anything.